Well, now to share with you my knowledge of acrylics. And I'm going to do that not only with the traditional ways of working, which are very much like painting between gouache, watercolour and oils. I'm also going to show you some of the work with mixed media work as well, where I've linked it with oil paints and with gold leafing and so on, to show the different sort of ways we can work with textural work and mixed media, to show the ways we can work into the abstract as well as into the figurative. And I'm going to show you as many different ways of using it for subjects as possible as well, working on canvas, working on card, working on board. Now, acrylic paint can be used on almost any surface that's primed, that will hold the paint. Acrylic paint cannot be put over something that's shiny, such as oils. Oils can go over acrylics, yes, but not the acrylics over the oils. So let me show you a variety of ways of working now, in very many different subjects. Now, acrylics have very many pluses as well as some minuses. It means that we can go out of doors and paint very quickly out of doors. It also means that we can help to mix them with other mediums, such as if I paint a landscape out of doors and do all the foundation work quickly with my acrylics, I can then work over straight afterwards within 20-30 minutes with the oils. So I could complete a painting in one day by underpainting with acrylics and then working in much more vibrant colours over with the oils. There are other newer acrylics coming out which I think have a lot of potential and which may have the same intensity as the oils. At present, most of the cheaper acrylics don't have quite that same intensity as oil paints, a little bit thinner, a little bit more translucent. But we'll go through that as we work through the different ways of working with these acrylic paints. Anyway, I hope you'll enjoy this film, and I'll now go into more depth and more detail about the brushes we'll use, the different types of paints we'll use, and how we can keep those paints as well. Now then, let's take a look at some of these paints we've got to use and the different ways that they are presented to us. And depending on the amount you use or the amount you want to buy as to the sort of size tub that you have, you can come up from the standard size tubes or smaller ones than that, right the way up to the larger tubs. Usually the larger the amount you buy, the cheaper it becomes. So to get the larger tub is cheaper in the long run, but if you just want to travel and keep light, then a bag of these smaller tubes is easier to carry. Then we'll look at the different ways we can use for painting those onto canvases. Okay, firstly let's look at the way to store our acrylics. Acrylics dry very quickly, so one very simple way to keep them fresh and very cheap way to do so is to use what's called a stay wet pallet. Now you can buy these boxes commercially and they're very expensive. But if you just get an ordinary sandwich box like this, some of the slightly deeper ones are better, and lay into it a sheet of kitchen paper, kitchen towel, and then a sheet of greaseproof paper on top, or even tracing paper, wet that, and your paints will stay wet for weeks and weeks and weeks. As long as that lid is shut, they will remain damp, remain wet. We've already talked about being able to freeze oil paints. We don't freeze acrylics, but if we keep them with the lid shut in a stay wet pallet like this, so it's a cheap way to do it. You can see these paints are still wet now, look, and they've been in there some weeks. Now from that we can have a second pallet with exactly the same, the kitchen paper and the tracing paper or greaseproof, and we can mix on that as well. Personally, I just use ordinary plastic pallets to mix into because I find that the paint will just peel out of those afterwards. They're smooth pallets and it always dries in them anyway, and after a while I can just get a knife and peel the stuff out. It doesn't matter to me. So for me, a stay wet pallet and simple plastic pallets like that are quite adequate. Now, what do we apply the paint with? There are lots of ways of applying paint to a surface. We can use sponges, we can use our fingers, we can use rags, we can use brushes of different textures and surfaces and shapes. We can even use a roller like this, which is rather fun, and you'll see me using this later in my demonstrations. These little rollers of different sizes are great for putting backgrounds on or making textures, and actually one of the larger paintings I've done, you'll see me doing almost the entire painting with a roller. This is my watercolour set, and you can use watercolour brushes for acrylics if they're the stiffer type. The softer they are, the more difficult it is. It's okay for very fine work. Remember that we can use acrylics just like watercolours if we want. We can paint them thinly with a glaze, as a glaze, or we can paint them thickly. If you're going to paint them thickly, then watercolour brushes are going to be too soft for it, and you'll need oil brushes, which have a little more body to them, a little more consistency. I like these filberts because I find, for me personally, that a filbert has a lovely round end, it's got a flat edge, and I've got more control with that, especially for painting portraits and so on. We can use it thinly or we can use it broadly across like that. And I also prefer the long handle brushes because I reach out when I'm painting as an impressionist. I like to reach out to the canvas and see what I'm doing. So for me, these filberts are the best. Equally though, you can use a flat if you want. The bristle brushes tend to be a little bit hard, so I tend to use these nylons, which are an intermediate brush. A brush that is too soft will clog up with the paint and won't lay it on very well. A brush that is too stiff and too bristly will take the paint off the canvas. But a nice intermediate brush like this will lay the paint on. You can gently lay it on with brush skills, layer over layer, while it's still wet even. Talking about laying things whilst they're still wet, then we have of course the painting knives. Now there's a difference between painting knives and palette knife. That is a palette knife and you can see that it comes straight across. The blade is flat. But a painting knife, which is quite different, has a blade like a trowel there which comes up at an angle and your fingers are not touching the painting. So for most of your use a painting knife is going to be far better, and one like that, which was one of my favourites, with that particular shape you can do almost everything with it. So we've got different painting knives there for different purposes, and palette knives, long ones, pointy ones, small ones, large ones, and even a fork for making textures, and actually even some household spatulas can be handy for doing larger amounts when you're really layering and plastering work on. Now then there are specialist brushes after that. We've got obviously round brushes and small pointy brushes, such as this one for doing much finer work and details. And then there's also the riggers. We've got a very long fine brush for doing very long fine lines or fine details, and the fan brushes for blending. One of the problems with acrylics is that they dry so very quickly, so you've got to blend very fast, and often if you can't do that in time you have to then work glazes over the top. That's one of the disadvantages, is that they can dry very fast. With oils it can be the other way around. It takes ever so long for them to dry, and if you want to do a fast glaze you can't do that with oils. So it's horses for courses. So sometimes you might want to paint with acrylics first and then work over the oils over the top, which we can do. Splattering can be done, as we're going to see, with acrylics, and we can do that either with a toothbrush or by splattering with a stiff bristle brush, or even one of the more textural effect brushes. And I'm going to discuss with you how we can get textures with various brushes and sponges and so on as we go along through this. So for me, this would be the set that I would be using nearly all the time with my acrylics. I keep a few sponges in there, I keep some small round pointy brushes, I keep my rigger brush, a fan, and my filberts, and that series will do me for nearly everything I want to do, either in oils or in acrylics. The same sort of set would do, although I try to keep them separate. Right, by using some mount card, I'm going to use some grey and some white on the brushes I just showed you, and the palette of paints. I'm just going to show you what can be done with acrylics, just how they can be handled. So we can paint the lights over the darks, and we can paint paint over paint, or we can glaze paint. Or we can paint matte paint over paint so that it doesn't show at all underneath, or we can use it more transparently. So straight away let's take an ordinary filbert, this one, and just dampen it a little just to get it working. And I'll take a little red, some crimson here, and use it thickly. If I paint it thickly through here, we can see that it will cover that darker card, but where it's thinner it's soaking in. It will cover this, the white as well. Now in that case we use the paint quite thickly. If we use it thinly now, exactly the same colour, but we use it like a watercolour, then you'll see a totally different effect, how we see the dark of the card coming underneath. Now that now becomes like watercolour, a pink rather than a red, because it's transparent. In a moment I'm going to put some yellow across this so that we can see how that can be used as a watercolour, and we can paint it to make an orange by putting the yellow over as a glaze. Let's just make that a little bit heavier down here, so it's a little bit wider. So I'm painting a thicker paint again now here, more opaquely. Now blending. If I want to blend, I'm going to paint thickly across this side again here. If I want to blend one colour into another, it has to be done while it's still wet. So while that's still wet, I can take for instance some purple now, come in with that fairly thickly again, and I can still just blend that in. But the card is very absorbent, and it is actually starting to soak in more quickly, and it's not allowing me to blend very easily, as you can see. So blending with acrylics is not as easy as it is with oils, I don't think. But we can glaze over far more quickly with them. Now in a matter of minutes that's going to be dry, and I'm going to be able to paint over. That's the beauty of it. If you find that your paint is rather thin, then white is a body colour, and white is not transparent, white is opaque. If I take some white and add it to that same red, but don't use too much white, just a little, it won't make it that much pinker, but it will give it a bit of body, and you can see it's much heavier and more opaque than the paint we just painted. So it's not as transparent because the white is giving it more body colour, it's making it more opaque. And the same up here. And you can see that's more opaque. So we can make the paint thinner with water to make it transparent, or we can make it slightly more opaque by adding more of the white as a body colour, as you can in fact with oil. As I've said to you, the cheaper acrylics, our students' range especially, tend to be a little more full of filler, or sometimes more transparent and thinner. I've even found that with some of the more expensive ones, especially with yellow. So let's just take this yellow neat, put some lemon yellow here, and I'll paint it fairly thickly straight across the dark area first. And you see just how transparent that is. You can see the colour underneath. I do the same down on the white, you can see it showing through. Now, one of the problems with this is that obviously I've got to put several coats on to make it work, and you can see where it's sunk into the dark colour here. Sometimes with acrylics we've got to paint several coats on to really get that vibrance, which is why I often paint with acrylics and then oils afterwards. Take a little bit of white now and add it to that yellow, just a tiny touch of white, just to give it that body colour I was talking about. See the difference now, how much stronger that is. Painted over the dark as well, much stronger and totally covering. Still slightly transparent. We need to give more than one coat, but you see how that white can add the filler to it without actually making it much lighter. So there's some pluses and minuses. It's dried very quickly within about 5 minutes, and I can now put glazes over. If I wanted to thin that paint down even more and then use it very thinly, look, I can still blend it there, I can still blend it here. While it's still wet I can use water to blend in. Now moving along slightly, let's take a dark colour this time, very deep blue, Prussian blue and a little bit of ultramarine, and paint a dark stripe down. You can see how the darker colours painted thickly will go on nice and opaquely. You can still glaze over those. If I thin that down with some water, you can see then I can use the transparency of it just like watercolour, and I can blend it in while it's still wet. So we need to start looking at special effects now. We need to start looking at the textures that we can get. Now we can get textures by dragging a brush out. If I take my fan brush, I can drag that paint across like that to give a feathery texture, almost like grasses. So we could do trees the same way. And as in with my watercolour brushes, there are many other brushes that give me textures as well. For instance, this serrated brush, it's a watercolour brush actually, but it does perfectly well for acrylics. If I use that with some of the same dark, you can see the wonderful effects we can get with that, which would also give us rushes and reeds, wouldn't it? And I mentioned earlier a rigger. If I now take a rigger and mix a little bit of the dark blue with that, we can get a very fine line, and a long fine line. Now, if I make the rigger into a blade, so that it's thicker one way than the other, one way I can have it quite a thick line, but the other way I would get a very thin line. So thin as that. So remember that even a round brush can be made into a thinner brush by squeezing it or turning it into a blade and using it sideways. See, of the acrylics is that we can paint light over dark. So if I take some white now and paint it with the rigger over the top of that dark blue, you can see we can get an immediate colour that isn't transparent. You could paint it thinner, I could make it lighter, but we can paint lights over darks, and we can paint in the other way around, darks over lights quite well. And we can do that immediately, which is the beauty of the acrylics. We can still splatter, as you'll see later, so taking now a fan brush and just splattering with the end of that brush, as you could do with a toothbrush in the same way to make snow effects. Remember, with the snow we'd have light over dark, or if it was a dark area, then you would come in and have the dark over the light in the same way, so we'd splatter it that way around. And whilst we're on textures, we should look at sponges as well. Let's just see what we can do with various sponges. You can see there a nice furry texture on that sponge, so we'll make a little bit of dark just to go with that again. Just to show you the effects we can get with the sponge. Here we go. We just use the sponge, and do twist the sponge. If you use the sponge the same way, you get a pattern like that, which we don't want. What we want is to get a texture which is constantly changing. Now you can also drag the sponge, which will give us a grassy texture. So if I drag it like that, look at it, quite a different texture. So there we have texture with the brush, the fan brush, with a serrated brush, with a sponge, and then dragging the sponge. Many things to make textures. We could use crinkled cling film, we could use tissue paper, we could use all sorts of things. And these are something you want to experiment with to get your various effects. And in the paintings I'm going to show you and demonstrate for you, you'll see me using various effects in this. The second tool you're going to see me using is a roller, these little sponge rollers. Let's just show you what can be done with that. First of all, we'll put slightly lighter colour paint on, so I'll make up a little bit of the cream, just to show you what will happen with that. And we'll put it over the lighter area. Like that. Then we'll try some darker colour, and we'll mix that colour and try slightly more orangey. And we can layer one colour over another like that. Let's try some darker now. We'll come down to here. You see the lovely furry effects we can get with that. You can use the edge of the roller to make a line. All sorts of patterns, and you will see me demonstrating the use of the roller. So paint can be applied with almost anything. You can even use our fingers if we want to. If I take a little bit of turquoise on my finger, I can add it in and blend it. I can use water to blend afterwards. I can put in heavier colours again against it. So brushes, fingers, cloths, there's so much you can use to make your paint effects with. And there are so many surfaces to paint over. I like to have a dark ground and paint over a dark ground very often, letting that dark show through, rather than have a white canvas and have to get it covered. To have a deep brown or deep purple or deep blue showing through and work light acrylics over the top is very, very effective and saves a lot of time. Now once your painting is finished, the colours will tend to sink, and more so even than oils. You usually need to varnish. Now I like to use a gloss varnish, and I find that either retouching varnish or this high gloss varnish, Damar is fine, this will do for oils and acrylics, will bring back that depth, and I like to use an aerosol because it's far easier. There are also various mediums that you can mix with the paint. We could mix sand, we could mix materials with it, even seeds. We can mix fillers, we can add various mediums to it to make it more shiny or thicker, even PVA glue. So there's all sorts of fun you could have mixing the paint with textures to actually add on there or build them up. I often mix PVA glue with filler and build up a surface and use seeds and so on, and then paint the acrylics over the top afterwards. Again, I will show you examples of that. Right, I've shown you the basics, I've shown you what the paints can do and some of the pluses and minuses. Let's get down now to painting a whole series of different artworks and show you how those ideas can be used and what fun you can have. Having taken a collection and plethora of photographs of Rosie in my lovely flower gardens here, I then took them and enhanced them and placed them and moved them around into other photographs, such as these poppy fields I took when she wasn't even there. This gives me an idea of how to do other compositions. It's much quicker than actually drawing them out, and I can see the colours immediately. Now I'm going to take this limited palette much further, so not just a basic effect of light. I'll start very loosely with a basic effect of light, but I'll gradually work these colours up to be much stronger this time with several layers and several coats. Again, I shall use both blocking in and a broken colour technique. In other words, I shall paint basic colours but blend them together with short feathered strokes, and also put one colour into another. So the pink below there I shall draw up into the blue above, and I shall draw the blue above down to the pink below, and work little amounts of colour as broken colour as the Impressionists into the entire sky. So you see I'm blocking in the colour now, and then you'll see me just feathering it into the colour below, and the same with the colour below into the one above. Note the difference again, even in this sky, of the cools and warm blues, the cool blues towards the horizon and the much warmer blues towards the higher areas of the sky, towards the top of the painting, through to my cobalt, to my ultramarine, even a little bit of purple coming into it. As a basic recipe, like making a cake, for most landscapes the cooler colours are in the distance and the background, and the texture and detail towards the front, and the warmer colours towards the front. Not always the case, because later we'll be painting a sunrise with Rosie in the same poppy field, and I shall use a composite again and a photograph of a sunset from a beach scene in New Zealand, in fact, when in that case we've got the opposites. We've got the warmer colours in the background and the cooler in the foreground for a sunrise or sunset. So So look at the variety of greens I'm going to paint here, from the cooler ones in the distant trees, and then gradually bringing those greens warmer and forward, and showing the difference between the different plants in the fields as well. My colours always have to be comparative. There's some blue linseed coming into the right there later, and I have to make sure that my greens aren't so cool that that very light blue linseed flower still shows. So I have to be comparative all of the time, the right colours relevant one to another in the right places in the right shapes, just like a jigsaw. So although I haven't painted all my colours here, you see I'm gradually testing each green one to another against the greens in the sky, against the greens in the field, and I shall gradually work those greens up. Here are now a more yellowy green against the more cool bluey greens, and the warmer green on the right, which will then allow the blue of the linseed flower to show against that green. Now you start to see the plethora of greens that we can attain, even with just those few colours. We only have one yellow, we only have a couple of blues, we have white, we have some browns and some reds, and with those few colours we can make this large variety of different greens, and bluey greens and browny greens. A very good test and exercise for you to try with your new paints is to not use all the man-made greens such as Viridian and Emerald, to actually mix as many greens as you can with as many of the yellows and the warm colours and the blues, alternately trying a little bit of each into one another, and just see how many greens you can make yourself. Again, I'm going to go for the mid-tones and cooler shadows first. I'm just establishing some of the flesh tones now with the purple shadows and blue shadows and the greys and blue greys. Then I'll go gradually warmer and eventually add the highlights, much warmer, brighter highlights. Here it was very important that the sky wasn't made too light to start with, because I knew that the hat had to be lighter than the sky behind it with the sun shining across it. Now, having established my mid-tones throughout the painting, I can start to work towards the much darker and lighter areas, and also the warmer colours. I've hinted in now with the warms into the flesh and around the face. The darker shadows are being painted in, and I can start to paint in the much lighter colours, and then, not long afterwards, go for the really fun bits, the bright poppies and the brighter flowers. make the sunlight catching the tips of the petals. There may even be a little cool pink coming across some of the petals as well as the light shines from the sky. Towards the end of the painting we start to do the daisies, the small crowd of daisies that she's in amongst and supposedly picking. And it's not just white daisies. We have the lighter white petals, yes, but there are also the shadowed petals in a very light pink and light blue, which gives it much more form. And finally, of course, in the middle of that, with some chrome yellow or cadmium yellow, we can place a little daisy round inside heads. So another nice loose painting, starting in my loose style and gradually tightening up till I'm satisfied that it's tight enough. We don't need to use oil paints across this one, the acrylics have been taken far enough for that purpose. And whilst we're on acrylics, just for fun, now something completely different. Whilst in Vienna I got this shot of these Lipizzaner horses, wonderful beasts, and I thought what an ideal time to show you how to use acrylics as glazes and as body colour being the white, which is slightly more opaque. So if we use that even thinner and use just washes of colour over a dark canvas ground, we can get this lovely effect of luminosity, which I want to be very loose with, just simply tinting the canvas, tinting the colours, and where I want something stronger, making the body colour a little thicker. Glazing in this way is a bit like using watercolour in reverse. Instead of putting dark over the lighter paper and making the colours look lighter by using it thinner, here I can put light over the dark and have the darks showing through and make the light lighter by adding the paint more thickly or lightly over the top of that. So it's the reverse, but still the same sort of method. Rather than do a highly finished copy of the photograph, which is not what my painting is about at all, it's not an illustration, I wanted just to use this effect of light. So I painted the horses loosely but fairly carefully as a centre and focal point, and the figure, and then gradually worked the background up extremely loosely and did a sort of vignette at the outside, in other words almost out of focus and blurred, and just gestural brushstrokes around those central, more solid sculptural forms. And you can see here the lovely effect of light that we can get. we're going to have a go at this rather pleasant woodland scene that I've done a composite of now from the Dales, and 3 pheasants that I took when photographing up there. Rather seasonal pictures that we're going to do at the moment. And I'm going to use my acrylics to start off with, and also rollers, and then work into brushes as well. And these little rollers, which come quite cheaply, you can get in different sizes, be very handy for doing some of the background effects in acrylics. These lovely soft pastel shades we're going to have behind the trees. I'm going to use my normal acrylic set, filberts, nylon, and a little bit of sponge there in case I need it as well, you see. And I'm going to mix my colours first with a brush. In this case I want these lighter colours here, so I'm going to start with a quite light pink, to a bit of white, plenty of water. So I'm fairly thin paint at the moment, fairly transparent. Little touch of my pink, a wee touch of yellow into that just to get things going. More white, a little more pink. That should do it nicely, and let's see what we can get with that. And we'll just start building up behind here. Can't see the colour much at the moment because of the white of the canvas, but it is coming in behind here. I'll add a little light blue into that later, but at the moment you can just see it going very thinly over the canvas, over the drawing, right through to here. So backgrounds at first, mix it more when I need it. Lovely soft background effects that I'm going to need. And I can still see my drawing through it, you see, this is the beauty. Remember that we can put then oils over acrylics, but we can't put the acrylics over the oils, or we shouldn't because it's liable to lift afterwards. I'm going to actually cover most of this with this light colour at first, and I'm going to gradually come into it then and blend the colours even with the sponge. This isn't for speed as much as it's for effect, because I do want to get some beautiful soft pastel shades and effects back here. Okay, now I'm going to gradually add blues to that, the broken colour, so we'll let that come all the way through there. Now I want to gradually get a bit stronger with these colours. A little bit more pink in there again, so get more and more subtle. Keep adding our colours, building it up to overlay almost in a broken colour technique. These colours one across each other here. Look at this beautiful soft background colour. Now I'll start to add my more golden warms. So I'll come in with some yellow ochre now. Gradually coming warm as it comes into the foreground. So these warms now just starting to show, which will push back those lovely soft colours I've done earlier. And we can use ordinary sponges to get a lot of this texture. This is to get the much softer background effects before I start on my, which I'm going to be doing soon, slightly more textural sponge work. So I think I've just about got my background in there now. Going to add a little more of the yellow. We've got these various textures of sponges that we can try and use to get the leaf textures as we come forward. But before I do that, I should put a few more highlights in and then paint in some of the branches in the background because these layers are coming over. Right, it's time to start working on the branches and twigs now, so I'm going to use this rigger and this fine round to start painting in all the little trees and twigs in the background. Start by mixing my dark. In this case I'm going to want quite a deep blue, so I'm going to take a little bit of Prussian blue, a touch of black, some ultramarine. I don't normally use black, but as I'm working with acrylics here, and they're going to go a bit softer anyway, I think they'll be ideal for this. I've still got some of my marks in from the drawing, so I can just see where I'm going in places. Consistency of paint, as I say, is quite important. We've got to have paint that's not too thick or it won't go on, not too thin, but you can see through it. So that's established our little branches. Now again it's back to texture. But before we do the texture, we need to come into some of the slightly lighter areas of these. Trees. So I'm going to take a little bit of cerulean, a little bit of ultramarine, a wee touch of the pink, the rose. Just find some of the cooler edges of these trees that are coming around here. They're not just black. Now I want to, while this is drying, I want to paint out lots of this white. So I'll take some burnt sienna and we'll simply get in here and coat this. Burnt sienna and blue I think we'll use on this. It's a nice dark, that's right. We'll get in and coat this whole thing with a coat of this colour just to get rid of the white. And I can use oils for that or whatever, but the thing is to get rid of this distraction of this white canvas. And the same with the pheasants. Let's give them a coat of colour. Nothing too strong, just a thin glaze of yellow ochre and a little sienna just to remove the white at the moment, and we can paint over them later, and you can still see the pencil marks just showing through. Now we're going to go back to our textural work and start using a bit of sponge to start putting back in these leaves up here and so on. I'm going to make up a nice yellow-green. Of course there are various brushes for special effects as well. Here for instance you can see a brush which has a very rough texture at the end. Not one you'd be able to paint a fine line with at all, but these specialist brushes, this one in particular, great for things like these ferns where it's going to give me a fairy effect. Well spread out first, we get a good bashing. You've found this with hakes as well, that new hakes are not much good, but a nice battered old hake is far more useful than a more smart one that just gives a blob of paint. If we make a mistake and put a bit too much of something on, we can go back over with the darks afterwards, there's no problem. Even into the blues. I need to go back to sponges again. So we're still sponging, try a different sponge this time. Put a bit more yellow in. Lots of building up, so it looks like we've done tons and tons of detail. I suppose in a way we have, but not having to paint every individual mark in. Now, a lot more golden gold, so we'll take some yellow ochre again, a bit of white. We've got to start doing seamted stuff actually on the pathway too. Start building this up with textures for the leaves in the background. Not worrying too much about going over the facets there because we're going to come back in detail on those later. You can see how it's gradually drawing out layers of leaves forward into the painting. Go on mixing colour after colour, finding them gradually, putting them in these blue greys and warms, all these different beautiful colours in the background here. And before I finish this evening, let it dry off, I'll just put a little bit more of the light yellows and green on. I just want to show you just how lovely that can look. So I'm going to make a little bit of cream with my lemon yellow and add a touch of viridian to it. And let's just see when we do get some of that lighter green on how effective it's going to be. There you see. It's going to look lovely. Let's bring a few of those stronger greens just a little bit into there, because this is the closer sunlight, and what we want to do is get this feeling of receding light. Lighter shapes here. Catch the sunlight coming through. It'll be happening into some of this as well. That's almost enough for tonight because the light's getting very low here and I can hardly see what I'm doing. Well, since we last worked on this, I put in a lot more details for the texturing, and I've repainted some of the brushes on top because they were lost with the texture going over. And I've just started now to put in some of these grasses and textures. This brush is very useful for that because this is one of those special effects brushes which you see breaks up into little fine furry bits. This is great for the moss, and now I'm going to go back to my little filbert and we'll start painting in these leaves. I'm still using the acrylics and I shall paint the pheasants after the leaves, but I'm going to have to go back into this with oils because I want a lot stronger colours, and although the acrylics are lovely, they do not quite ever give the vibrance of the oils. I'll start mixing up the orangey browns for the leaves. Start with some yellow ochre, a little touch of burnt sienna, and use it as a pure colour at first. If the colour's on my brush and I see it somewhere else, for instance in the pheasants, then I'm going to use that colour, because wherever you make a colour and see it, then use it again rather than have to mix it up while you're at it. And I need the underpainting of these pheasant feathers to go on before I think about any oils even. Quite a few of these colours are going to be coming down into the leaves as well, so it's as well to establish this now and find some of these so that I know what I'm going to be using later as well. And that helps us to establish which colour is right one to another. Again, by using an impressionist or slightly pointillist style. And making the textures actually recreate the bird. I'm using mauve at the moment, or purple. As you see, so far I've managed to get away with using actually just the one brush. Surprising what we can get done just with a filbert, which is a lovely brush. This white I want taking down a fraction later, just to again establish the colours at the moment. Right, and back to our leaves. Gradually getting lighter and lighter with my little bits of leaf that are reflecting light, watching carefully as to whether they're warm or cool, browns or purples. See, we're well on with the painting this morning, and so far I've worked only with acrylics, and I want to brighten up this a bit more later, but I just need to carry on a bit more with the acrylics before I finish. This bird's looking rather flat at the moment, and we've got more ferns and things to do in the distance, and also a few more blues to put in as well. I'm going to use my filbert again. And we'll just start looking at some of these bluer marks around here, so a little bit of cerulean blue, a wee touch of the green just to bring it back a bit, and let's start looking at some of these slightly bluer, cooler turquoise greens in here, which will make the warm greens look even warmer, and that's what we're playing with. Rough against smooth, light against dark, cool against warm, always these things going on and playing one colour against another, which will bring out also these pheasants, because the coolness of these leaves, the green is the opposite to the red, as Constable used in his paintings. You will nearly always notice in Constable's paintings somewhere a little red figure, and the reason for that has always been that he wants to play the opposite in the colour circle, a complementary colour of red against the green, as I do in my beach scenes when I play the purple against the yellow for shadows. So we'll bring this cool all the way down, surprising where it gets to. You don't think it's in the leaves. People tend to, especially the amateurs, tend to paint green grass, blue sky, brown soil, but it isn't like that. Little bits of colour going on in these. I've got to find some of them in the rocks and things there as well to do. If you're painting a picture, everything should be of the same way normally. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions to the rules, as there are in almost everything, but if you suddenly start painting something quite differently, it will stand out like a sore thumb. We could finish the whole painting in the acrylics if it came to it, but I think it might be nice just to use some of the strength of the oils coming into this. So let's do that now then, with a very fine brush, especially on the birds. We'll move on to some of the slightly stronger colours with the oils, just to bring it out. So we'll close up our little homemade stay wet palette, put a little bit more water back in just for the moment so that it stays wet, just like that. Then those paints will stay like that for weeks. And we'll change our brushes over as well and bring on the oils. Little terps, white spirit, and a different set of brushes. Actually, we shan't need all that many brushes. I shall only need fairly fine brushes for this job. Right, we'll do some brush work and we'll do some sponging as well. Let's look at these pheasants at first, and we'll just look at one or two of the lighter colours that we want to just paint details over. Little areas here of very light cream that have disappeared. So we'll take a little bit of white, tiny touch of chrome yellow. I'm just going to take that down a tab with some yellow ochre, because this is our final, and I really do want to make this quite a representational piece. So you can really see what I'm doing. Let's zoom in on these birds, and we'll just use this very small brush to tickle in these little half moon shaped feathers. And this paint hopefully is not going to sink like the acrylic has been doing, because it's the oils, it's a stronger pigment altogether. It'll just pick out the bird, you see. Wherever it's lighter as well up here, we'll use a little bit more of it up here as well. Right, now change colour, and we're going to go to cadmium orange, deep one at the moment. We'll just use that pure, and see if we can bring out the lovely golden feathers here a little bit more. With this being a lot more orange, it will make the leaves behind seem less brown and garish and more subtle. Although we might actually need some of this colour in those leaves, I can see that now. Now I'm doing it, I can see quite a few oranges coming in these leaves here which need brightening up from the sunlight. So we'll bring in these oils wherever we need them. Cadmium red now, a bit of red down here, nice bright pheasant, and a little bit more around his eye perhaps as well, right down to a cooler red, a slight bit of purple now. Really want to feel for these, and we've got to start looking at the these lovely blues that I did earlier with the acrylics have sunk. So to bring out those colours again with a bit of oil. So some cobalt, a little bit of cerulean now. Really make that pheasant's head shine. The colours on my brush, some of those blues are coming in down here amongst the oranges. Look at that vibrance of colour we can get. Now those colours are only going to show if they have the dark against them. So let's take some Prussian blue, a very dark blue, and there's little spots of dark that are in the feathers that we need now to make these lights stand out against it. You see the wonderful effect we can get with the oils, which are just that bit brighter than these acrylics, and with a little bit of brown with that because that dark wants warming up a fraction here. We'll move on down to the one below. I'm still using our small brush. We'll take some of the cadmium orange again. Don't want to overdo it because say it would look out of place and it would make the birds look as if they're stuck on. Deep. Some cadmium red now. But these stronger colours I'm hoping will just pull it out. Make the bird almost become three-dimensional. Let's move across to the other pheasant. I don't think he's too far out. We'll put a little bit more cobalt just into the blue there for a start. Gives a bit more gleam. I think that's the pheasants about as far as I want to go with them. Now I need to look at the greens and the textures also in the leaves where I want to be a bit stronger. You can see the richness that we're getting in control now. Let's start looking at the ferns here a bit. I'm going to take some yellow green, some bright green, a little bit of white, and really see how much stronger I can bring up some of these greens. Got to have just the right consistency, so I've got just the amount of terps that I require. And I think you'll be surprised just how bright we can make these, how we can get the highlights going on these now, look. And it'll make things really start to pull together. Little bits of fern and which the acrylics were very nice, but they were sinking a bit too much. And these paints, oils, just give that bit more vibrance. Still working on these various ferns, the yellow greens and so on. I want to start catching sunlight coming through these ferns. On the top left we have these very strong leaves, and now if I put them in with the oils, you see just how much stronger they could actually be than they were, or than they are. Let's really give that some welly. Get these autumn colours going. See how much more vibrant, how much stronger it really is then. And the light sparkling down through these trees. And these stronger greens are pushing the other back, you see. Right, I think it's time now to start looking back at the leaves. Little flat-ended brush for this. And mix up some burnt sienna and some yellow ochre, because this time with the oils it's going to be a lot stronger. Well, let's just try that pure first of all. You can see the difference in strength already. I'm going to take some of that with a little bit of white, make a much lighter red. I think I need to go a bit warmer still, so I'm going to take a bit of cadmium red and orange and bring that into it, especially here in the foreground, which will also link, I think, with the pheasant. I'm hoping it will. There we are, look. And it'll bring the pheasant out and forward because the colours will relate to it. I don't think we're that far off completing this painting, because otherwise we could go on forever. Just playing with colours backwards and forwards now to just try and get this right. Not easy. And I reckon that puts us about there. This first one is a large canvas and a whole series of different photographs that I've taken over the past winters, and I want to get the desolation of this scene across the beach. Horizon here, sunlight and all of the cool winter light coming through, and the ice and the snow on the beach, it was so cold. Also the dog sitting here, got a lovely photograph of the Labrador, the black one, with some washed up crab pots. It gives rather an unusual image. And then through that, in various places, I want to have textures of these berries that are on the beach. They are actually edible, and bring that orange through these various cools and blues. And I'm going to build this up first with wool, and then with textures of filler and PVA glue, and then also with seeds and berries and nuts as well, which have been dried to give extra and additional textures. Then I'm going to prime it with black acrylic, then I'm going to gradually work up the colours. Maybe adding more texture later, using the wools again, but using the wools soaked in PVA glue to give the transparency and wonderful vibrancy of cool colours we can get, linking with the paints. So a mixed media piece. And I'm going to cut these wools to texture the various parts that I want to texture. For instance, the netting here, I'm going to cut it for that first of all, and build up just some of these areas of ice edges and so on. And then I'll use the filler, and then I shall use the textures of the seeds and things after that. So first of all I want the wool to go across these areas. If I want a whole series of short pieces, I can just wrap the wool around my hand and then use my knife to cut through, like this. And if I do the same the other way, I'll have enough short pieces to do the whole of that crab pot, I reckon. And then I shall also want some longer ones. So again, if I just wrap around my hand, and instead I'm only cut once, I'll have enough of the longer pieces, I think, for my needs. And then I need to mix some PVA glue with some water to soak these in, to lay them on. Not too thin a mixture, not too thick either. Let's cut through there. And that gives me my longer ones. Right, this sort of mixture will do us. A nice, thin, milky, creamy mixture of PVA glue and the wool, and into that I can add my wool, soak it really well, plenty there, and then take out the bits that I need and just lay them into place on my canvas, and they will just stick and become quite hard and shiny later. So you can see here I've got halfway through the netting and some of the twig areas that I want to be building up for the berries later. I've just cut some more wool. I'll soak up the rest of this glue in that. They're all nice and gungy and covered in the glue. Plenty of it. It's got to stick down really well. Still working up these sticks and bits of netting. Just intuitively feeling also where the lines will go. Once I have that basic netting done and some of the branches of these berries, I've got to start looking at the swirling effects of the ice and how I can build that up right from the very horizon here. Just slop on the wool and make sure that there's plenty of glue to stick it as well. So we're going to be adjusting these textures as we go along. The dog I want to build up with filler and a painting knife rather than use the wool. Right, at this stage we need to let this dry, and you can see how I've now built up some of the basic patterns of these nets and the swirls, and I shall come back into this with filler and glue and then build up the textures more. Okay, first we're going to build up the dog. Just layer some on there until we get within those lines. Make sure it sticks. You must make sure that this stuff sticks on first of all to the canvas before moulding it round. Make sure it's got a good key. So this is a mixture of filler and PVA glue. This is why I use the PVA glue as well, because it gives it more plasticity. It's not going to just crack off. Plus it sticks even better. This canvas is going to have quite a lot of banging about in its life, being transported and things, so if we had just the filler alone, the chances are it would crack off. Shape for the dog done. Now, I think we'll also bring out the shadow from it. The shadow, but of course the texture of everything, all this ice and stuff coming across, which is rather lovely. And we're going to add that into the bits of string that we've been putting on. They're going to become a part of it, not just separated out. The feeling of this ice on the surface, and what better to do it than use this paste. Now coming around here we've got quite a chunk of ice and snow actually laying over this. So this is our base layer, and we're going to start adding textures on top of this a bit later on. Before I lay any textures, I've got to think just where I want things. I'll start adding some, but I'll add some before I put a base colour on, and some afterwards. But the filler is now dried nicely, and I want to start putting texture on the top of this. So I want to use various seeds and grains mixed with PVA glue to do that. It takes a trip to the local supermarket to find something like that. Here we've got ordinary rice grains and then various peas and beans and pulses, which are ideal, and all different sizes and shapes like pebbles and rocks in miniature. So I'm going to mix some of these with the PVA glue and we'll distribute them and place them and sculpt them into the areas that we want on the ice and the textures that we require. Here's our first mix of some fine textures, rice and so on, and we'll lay those on into the background. I want them to be coming in here. We smooth them actually onto the surface of the canvas as well. You want the cross between the textures of these and the icy texture that we've already got with the filler. Some of this will brush off later, but we want most of it to stay in place, so I'll pat it well down. Now I want some slightly larger pulses. And now another mix. See here we've got nice large split peas this time and so on. And we'll start to add those amongst these textures here. So now these slightly larger beams. And they'll come towards the foreground because being larger objects, that's where we expect to find larger objects. Well, it looks quite attractive actually even now, doesn't it? But hopefully it'll be even more attractive once we get the colours all in. I'd almost forgotten to do were these red berries that I'm going to use to foil against the coolness of all of the ice and snow. And they're going to go in branches up and along these vertical stems. Okay, the seeds have now dried and I can start to paint over and around them. I want to do this area of netting first, and because I want the netting to be dark, I've got to paint light through here. So I'm going to make a very, very light pink at first and push that right into and through all this netting. I want that to go behind there. So I'm using a good stiff nylon brush to do this. Because I'm going to put the dark over the top of this netting and let this light show through. Now the thing is, I'm going to do the reverse with the rest of it, because I'm going to put dark over the whole of the rest of the painting to sponge off this surface a bit, because I like the colour of these seeds and things here. And then I'm going to put light over the top of that, so it's going to be the reverse. So here we're putting light and then dark over the top, then we're going to put dark and then light over the top. So that pink coming right down through here. Blue, I'm going to use some cobalt and a little bit of cerulean. Really get in there with that. It comes right up through to the edge of this stuff here. Right, from then on we're going to be using the black. And I cover the whole thing in the black, and then I shall work the colours over the top of that again. And now we can work across the surface of these bits of wool to give the effect of the netting and the snow behind, so you can see what I was up to and how it's going to work when I even do the reverse later, and we have the light over the dark later on. The thing is, you've got to try and get right into the areas of white, because otherwise you get these little sparkles of white showing, which aren't actually very nice in this case. So we've got to really keep the texturing and brush the paint well in, but get right down underneath and around all these bits of textures, so that the little bits of white don't sparkle through afterwards. And actually uses a fair amount of paint doing something like this as well. You don't realise, I think, sometimes how much materials cost either, but if we do something like this, not expensive in the fact that the seeds and things aren't too bad, but it still, you know, it soon builds, soon adds up. And so these areas now, these are going to be the bright red berries that we're going to have over the blues. So working over it fairly quickly, but it's not easy to see all these little bits of white. Well, there we are, we've got that covered now. So we should be ready to work the light colours over it shortly. A bit of gold leafing here and there before I even start painting now. The people like this colour, this ultramarine mix. It's almost a cobalt, it's sort of in between ultramarine and cobalt. It's a very popular colour anyway. So it'll make a good base colour for us. Right, that's all the blues in. Now we've got to look at other blues and purples to go over that once that's dried off a bit. Okay, I've done the acrylic base. Now I'm going to start using the actual coloured acrylics, my blues and so on, across the surface. And we've got several pictures we can use. That's the one we're using as the main base down here, but also we've got the sky to think about. Whether to start with the sky actually, although I might put a wash of blue in down here. And this is the beauty of having done these darks earlier, is that the black is going to gleam through. Really attractive these colours can be as well. Gradually build up the pinks and the creams and the variations of warm and cool blues. And there's all sorts of tints going on. There's a slight greeny yellowy tint coming into it down here as well. So it's really enjoy searching for these colours in here. And that gives us the effect of sunlight against this lovely texturing of ice and snow. Got this balance between the extreme cools and warms. You can see the fun we can have with both textures and paint at the same time, and playing with them one to another like this. So it's worth taking the time to gradually build up these different things, planning ahead to get these effects. Varying brushstrokes and textures to really try and get this effect of glistening light blinding us over snow and ice. And now we've got the feeling of this icy blast, cold beach on a winter's day, wind sweeping across, blowing the ice crystals and snow, but so clean. And the Labrador dog, we need a slightly smaller brush perhaps for this. Have to work on this backwards and forwards because there's so much texture on the area as well. It's not easy to get the drawing right. Or look right. I quite like the texture of that. I don't want to do an awful lot more. What I want to do now is look at these reds and the berry that I was going to have. Yeah, now putting some of these red berries in that are indigenous to this area. We're on the final stages of this. I think sometimes paintings just work and that's it, I say leave them. For me this is about done. Maybe just a little more touches here and there, a little bit of white, but it won't need much. So I'll just put a little bit more white just on top of some of these twigs and branches. Give the feeling of a little bit of ice and snow on them. We don't want to be too literal, and we don't want to take the eye away from the main scene too much either. And I would say we're about there. And here is another completely different painting done in the same series but with a totally different, warmer colour palette. Here we are with another black prime canvas. So we're going to use an acrylic ground here with acrylics over the top. In that case, with acrylics over the top, we're going to be able to do a bit of glazing and using the paint quite thinly in places, impasto, and then gradually building up layers and treating it in between oil painting techniques and watercolour techniques, which is one of the beauties of using the acrylics. And I'm going to do this rather nice scene of a sunrise where I took a series of shots as yachts left Saltfleet Haven a while ago after the barbecue, early morning, and then I got a shot later on of some Canada geese going across, and I've superimposed them on to get this early morning of barnacle geese. A nice golden and silver light coming through. One of the beauties of this painting is we can do it with a very limited palette. All we need is burnt sienna, some chrome yellow, some Prussian blue, and a little white. And all of our colours can be mixed from those. In this case I started with a very dark acrylic ground. Usually I mix deep Prussian blue and maybe a purple, but this time just a simple black acrylic base. By feathering the paint on, or by painting it a little more thinly, or even just using dry brush work or scumbling, we can let the black base show through. So we can glaze and make things darker, or we can allow texturing to happen, especially for reflections there or textural effects in the sky and the clouds. I started by painting white around the silhouettes of the 4 flying geese, so you can see them showing there, and then I painted those shapes in at the very end of the painting into more detail. Then I worked the white outwards, gradually moving into the lighter blues and mixing my greys. The primary colour of blue and then the tertiary colour of the brown, the burnt sienna, can give you some lovely variations of subtle greys, because you can move towards the cool colours with the blue or towards the warm colours with the browns. Adding white as well then, and then using the glazing effects of the dark showing through as I'm doing here, you can see these very subtle blue greys that we can get. By using just the burnt sienna and the Prussian blue, we can get almost a black anyway. So between these 4 colours we can work through from the very darkest almost blacks to the very lightest pale warm and cool greys. Of course with the burnt sienna and white we can get a pink, and we've also got our cream with the yellow and white. Then adding those together we can get orangey pale colours. We've got a whole variety of colours just with those few. Using acrylics of course has both swings and roundabouts. In other words, there are pluses and minuses. The paint dries very quickly, yes, which means that we can put succeeding coats on quite quickly. We can also do glazes much more quickly than with oils. But it also means that it dries quick enough to make it difficult to blend at times. So you've got to blend very quickly before the paint dries, or you'll be glazing or having to work new coats over it. With oils that's quite different because they remain wet, so you can keep blending or working them for ages afterwards. You can buy different mediums to add to the acrylics. You can buy retarders to actually slow them down from drying, and even some mediums that will even speed them up drying. Humidity also plays quite a big difference both in watercolours and with acrylics. One of the most difficult times I had painting acrylics was over in Switzerland, where in fact top of the mountains it was just so hot that I couldn't get the paint from the Stay Wet palette on my brush onto the canvas before it was drying on the brush. Anyway, why not watch a while now as I gradually build this painting up, mixing this variety of cool and warm greys, and you see the ways I use different directions of my brush strokes to get the feeling of the depth of the water and reflections from this light, almost like moonlight though it's early sunrise, shining over the surface of the water. So often I see people just painting along forms, along an arm or down a leg, or just across water. If we're doing water, one of the best ways on still water is to feel the depth first, to do the verticals first, to feel into the reflections and the depth of it, and then to go across on the surface strokes with the horizontals more. Again, to give a sky with more depth, if we feel with the brush strokes the directions of perspective, especially one-point perspective, so we aim all of our little fluffy clouds towards one point into the distance with our brush strokes rather than just going across or underneath the clouds. It'll make a sky of greater depth, almost like the rays of sunset. Here you see me working all around these clouds in different directions, the rays of light coming out, feeling around the forms, the reflections and counter-reflections. Can you see now this variety between the warm and cool grey just by adding a little burnt sienna or a little more of the blue? I haven't even got to the creams yet. I've only just barely touched on the fraction of yellow into those clouds. And also how I'm constantly changing direction of brushstroke from vertical to horizontal, playing the lights against the darks, and also the textures and surfaces. Here, this edge of this piece of marshland, where it was black, and I'm coming now in with the deep Prussian blue and some brown, and giving it a slightly rougher edge, as if the reeds are breaking into the edge reflections there, and they're reflecting from the reeds above. In a moment I'll be painting the reeds on the top surface of that dark edge. Once again I'm starting very loosely so that I can tighten up to any level that I wish, almost to photographic realism if I wanted to do that. You can see I'm now working more finely on the geese, and I've been painting little highlights and reflections and ripples on the water with a rigger brush as I am now. So we can go into as much detail as we want. Well, there we are, quite a nice painting done all within about 1 hour 30 minutes. So very rapid techniques, giving us these lovely effects just with those few colours. Okay, this time a little bit different. We've just done the oil painting with the painting knives, not the palette knife, the painting knives, with oils, but this time we're going to use acrylics and the filberts again, soft brushes, and try and make a much more photographic scene, perhaps a little bit more realistically, and get these effects in acrylics of this photograph and these nice fluffy big huge clouds. What's easy to do with acrylics, sometimes easy with oils because the oils remain wet longer, you can blend them. But we'll have a go with these acrylic paints and see what we can do. Well, I want to start off by actually making the very light blue of the sky, which is straight away white and cerulean blue. So I'm going to take some white, some cerulean blue. There'll be more than one blue in this, and make a mix straight away because it's quite a light blue mix. But it's not yellow enough. It's not, as we had the same problem with the oils earlier on, it's not quite turquoise enough. It's okay at the top here, be fine for this top layer, but it won't be yellow enough for lower down. A nice even coat all the way across. That's alright at the very top, but we're going to want it more turquoise as it comes down. Nice deep blue. Deeper still, I'm going to add some more turquoise to that. I normally start this high up with something like ultramarine blue or even cobalt. Just blending in a little bit stronger colour there as I come down. Right, then I want to make it more turquoise by adding a little yellow. You can see what I'm doing there. Put some more yellow into that paint and just try it out. Still a little bit dark, a little bit bluer. Bit lighter. There we go. That's more like it. Come right the way across that, blending it in. Just going to tickle it in, feather it in there, blend that gently together. That blue. So I do want this idea of a very atmospheric bright sky. And we come down still more, add a bit more blue, a bit more white. Come right down into where these clouds are here. Get it in quick before it dries, and we don't want different layers of it. Out the way across, and again start to blend that in. Just to be a slightly lighter colour there. The cloud coming in, so I'll just get that in now. Plenty of paint on, right around these clouds, in between there as well. And down into here. Lovely filbert brushes that you can feel with these filberts. You can you've got so much control, and they work into the canvas nicely as well. Nylon filbert brushes. A bit more paint, not quite enough there. There we go. Now we'll just blend those colours in slightly more. Just taking them through to the deeper blue while it's still just wet enough, because this stuff dries very, very quickly. Tickle it in. There we are. That gives us our sky, the gradual upward blending of the vertical blending of the blues. Now, I've got a little bit of blue here and there elsewhere. I've only got that cloud done. Some under here. Let that dry off now. Have a look at our various greys going up there next. And the greys often are made by primary and tertiary colours such as the brown and blues. So we've got our medium blue here already. I'm not going to go to a darker blue yet, saving that for later. I'm going to take a little touch of brown to go into that. You see there. Let's just show you what I mean. We get quite a nice blue-grey brown. And a little bit more. A little touch of water now, just to thin it down a fraction, to get this blue-grey brown. A bit too dark, a bit too dark. We'll just work in some of those shadows up here and underneath the clouds. Right the way through there. I'm going to go slightly stronger with this grey in a moment. This is just to establish it. Through that, up and through here, edge of that cloud. Even just blending slightly into the sky. Some of that grey just coming through there. Whilst the acrylic is still just wet enough for this. And some of that grey cloud coming up and off here, just blending into the sky a little. Just an indication of it wafting up there. Just feathering it in. This little short strokes like this is called feathering. A bit more, a little bit of white, a little bit of the cerulean, a little bit of burnt sienna, and there's our warm browny greys for the cloud. Just again feather that in. I'm going to get rid of most of the white now by feathering in this grey across here. I'm going to bring in the lighter grey later and the lights of the clouds. Just want to blend this in at the moment because we want a fairly photographic finish this time, a very much more figurative painting. We're going to have some darker greys shortly, but build this up gradually, these little strokes of colour. Blue-grey across the horizon. Quite rapidly you see this technique, just losing the canvas. We'll work up the fluffy clouds over this. Keep it going, a bit more water, more white, more cerulean, a little burnt sienna. And brown again. Very slight and subtle changes in colour as I go along. I'm going to paint right up to the horizon there. Lose the white. I want to get rid of this white canvas. I want to get rid of just of the glowing of the undercolour when I paint these greys in. So we don't pussyfoot about. Make the colour, put it on, right colour, right shape, right places, and the jigsaw will just come together. Now let's make some of the slightly darker greys. Same thing again, the white and the cerulean, but this time a little more of the blue, a little more of the brown. So that the colour is a bit deeper. It's almost too much at the moment, but we'll have a look. Go coming along here, it's quite dark. Just where that light shines through, and we'll just blend that down and through where this cloud comes in here, through there, just fluffy soft strokes to gradually build up these darker areas of grey in between the clouds. Directionally. If it seems too dark, we'll come back a bit and just line up with a little bit of white. That's all we've got to do. Gradually we'll build up these lovely greys. Getting the effects of these clouds coming through here. I say we're going to come across this with some lighter greys and creams to get the actual cloud effects. Strong darks under here. Well, that's our base colours done for the sky. Now let's start looking at the lighter colours. We need one brush for this at the moment. And we've got sort of creams and pinks to do. So I'm going to start with, again, the white, fairly obviously on this one. And into that white I'm going to put a little bit of yellow to make a cream. And then a wee touch of my rose. And that's going to give me a creamy pink. I want to gradually build up from my darkest colours to my lightest. So I'm going to work up this colour next. I'm going to put a little bit of that grey with it just to deaden it a bit. Just a little bit too light. That. Just bring it back a fraction. Start bringing in these pinky greys to this. Again, just giving soft, furry edges. You can see what I'm trying to do now. Perhaps you see it start to billow a bit as clouds do. Where the light's shining through, we'll catch little bits of sunlight on those clouds behind. So we don't want to be too light too soon, just gradually picking up the light shining through the cloud there with this yellow pink right up into here, high above. Very subtle cloud. Letting that pink just build up. And where it's heavy, we'll put it on more heavily. The lovely effects we can get. I'm trying to make this light shine through it in between. Here, quite bright, but subtle areas. Look at the shapes and forms of these clouds. We're only painting about them, we aren't copying them, we're using the cloud. Just scumbling over the surface now as much as feathering, just touching, almost dry brushing the surface there to get the feeling of this light reflecting on these misty they come down into here, underneath the light just shining through in between. You see how the clouds are building up now. Catching the light of the sun, even up into here. Go lighter still. We've done our pinks now, look, you see. So now we're going to take some more of that white and a little touch of the yellow. And a tad creamer now. Still, we don't want to go too strong too soon. Let's just see how that works. There we are, that's where that wants to be. Coming to the cloud here. It's fairly light, I don't want to go too bright. Keep it back a bit. Just feel it as carefully and subtly. Put it on, leave it alone now. Want to feel these fluffy white bits of cloud. Using my brush, just twisting it around here to try and get these light areas. Down to the horizon underneath there where the light's coming through. A bit stronger there. Keep making my tones up. Let's find these bits of light cloud under here now. Oh, it's a lovely big chunk of white or light cloud there. Quite important. They're all important. It comes around that. So you can see how we can get these lovely soft, subtle effects. We still haven't gone very, very white. We're still keeping our colours slightly muted. Put a little light on top of that cloud. It's quite strong under here. I'll make a little more colour. Here it's quite strong coming down. Down through and round that cloud. That's quite strong shape, showing around a dark lump. To get the underneath of these, I want to get the feeling of the light coming through underneath these clouds here. Luminosity. We've almost got our clouds finished. We don't have to be too bright with them. A little more of that light cream just to really catch the tops of these clouds. that final bit of whiteness. And glowing. I need to go back to my blue here a little bit because I've lost a little bit of the blue that was in there, so I have to go back to that a fraction. There's a bit more blue just happening down into there. And then the cloud is just coming out there a bit. While we're on that blue-grey, let's come back into here with that same blue and just make the blue-greys a little bluer in places to link in down there with the sky above just a little bit more. It's a little bit too warm in places there. I want a little bit more blue-grey. And that gives us a nice subtle sky. Full of movement. And next we're going to go down to the landscape itself and start to paint in some of these areas. So I want to be fairly clear of what we're doing. I'm going to go down a brush size. and I want to make a base colour for the back there, a little bit like I did with the oil painting. I'm going to start with some yellow and some white to make a cream, because this acrylic is quite thin, and unless I put some white into it, it does tend to be very jelly-like and transparent. So I'm making a very light green at the minute. Take that and add it to my earlier blue-grey. Let's just test that now. That gives me quite a nice colour for the background just there. Wherever I see a colour, I've got to put it in. Across there, back of there a little bit. Anywhere else yet? Maybe the top of there a bit. Get a little bit warmer there later, but we'll just get it in for the minute. So again, I want to lose this white canvas as quickly as I can, so that I can paint these colours on top. I start to find some of that green coming into the clouds as well. Now I'm putting a little glaze, a little thin wash of the green I've just been doing down into the clouds, otherwise I don't want it standing out too much from the actual landscape. So I'm going to add a little bit of this green into the clouds as well, so that they seem to be a part of each other more. And that's one of the beauties of acrylics, is that we can use paint opaquely, thickly, and we can also go in with glazes as soon as it's dry. A little bit more rose into that, and I can paint some of the background colour here. Even a little purple now. I want to start getting some darker colours for my background. We've got some darker hills there. I can glaze over these later, I just want to get the base colour established. mixing up a warmer grey now. Go back here. Put some highlights into that later with a smaller brush. It's quite dark just there. Down here. Just using the colours on my palette, a mixture of these various colours I've been making at the moment, to gradually feel the distant pinks and greens that are up there. Bits of sunlight that are just catching top of that rock. When you've got a colour on your brush and it's the same as somewhere else, use it. Start making some different greens now. Go back to my blue and yellow that I was using for the sky, the lighter blue at the moment. Let's just see how that works. Still fairly yellow. Quite a strong yellow that is. It's going to come down here somewhere, I think. So I need to be quite a bit lighter yet. There we are. Leaking these bits of light up into the hills. Getting rid of the white all the time so I can gradually work up into it with purer colours later. Keep mixing my greens. I need quite bright green at the minute, and I haven't really got the right colours for that, but I'm getting as near as I can. And I figure that if I make some lighter later, it'll work better. Must be a bit more yellow. Yep, there we go. Up into the farm there, right through underneath. Going to blend down into this towards the end, just finding out where shapes are at the moment. And establishing warm and cool greens. Whereas this green here is a lot more orange. I'm going to add some brown and some white to my yellow to make it a lot more orange. And you see the colour we get, which is a much nicer, warmer colour that draws the eye forward. Very rapid way of working. Decide your colour, mix it, put it on, leave it alone. Can't keep pussyfooting about. Look for the darker greens coming in. Shadows here. Play with those in a moment. The light shines across these hills, importantly here as well. I'm not going to leave these shapes exactly like this, I just want to get rid of this horrible white so that I see where my tones are. I lose all this white. I don't even want the canvas showing through anywhere at this stage. Line of dark trees going all the way along there. I'll get in a moment. And here. much lighter area just going on. I'll do that later. At the moment it's to just establish these lights and darks. Down here, this area, it's very dark green. I'm going to take some stronger blue now, some cobalt, and add a little yellow to that. Won't need much because that stronger blue is almost there as it is, so let's get that in there and paint out this white canvas straight away. Also these very dark trees coming in here that I'm going to put in more clearly as we go on. Need to make some more of that. Doesn't look very much then. Very dark there. So we get these strong lights against darks when we get very strong sunlight, which is gorgeous to paint. Just flick these trees in all the way down here. And then continue painting in this darker. Green of these trees. That shadow comes behind them here. Indicating a few trees there. Get rid of this. I'll come back in with some lighter greens there afterwards. At the moment, we just need to get rid of this horrible white. You can see where the light's starting to pick up. These shadows work. I want to indicate a few of these little trees in the background here as well. Alright, let's look at this green down here. More yellow, straight into the dark green I was doing. Piles of yellow. Take a fairly deep green still, especially down there where it's stronger. Not quite as strong, almost viridian green going on down here. To lose this canvas. into the palette just to get this covered. Pile it on, get it covered. There's a brick wall, there's a stone wall along here that has to be painted in later. So I'll just get the green up to it for the minute. And level out the paint, gently pulling it across so that we get a nice, too many of these brush marks showing, fairly even surface. The way that dark paint comes through into there as well. And even into this warmer colour, especially across here. That green is actually streaking across there. Here too. There it gets a bit lighter, so we add a bit of white to it. As we start to add that into the sunshine and just catching the light there. Here. Around those trees and in between here. Now the paint's drying a bit, it's easier to paint cleaner colours in, isn't it? Well, it's only been a few minutes, but the paint's totally dry now, so we can move on. And I'm going to go down to a slightly smaller brush, not hugely smaller, but down to 1/4 inch, because we're going to start painting in some of these dark areas in the trees here. These trees are quite a bit darker, in fact. So I'm going to take some of my... Hello, is that you, Puss? Meow. Ultramarine. A little bit of brown, a lovely dark, a bit more ultramarine into that. Hopefully I won't need to use black at all for this job. And a little touch of yellow, just to make it slightly green. We see we've got that lovely dark colour there. Now if I come into these trees here with that, look at the lovely dark we get. We haven't had to use black, which is very inert and rather dead. You can use a dark colour like this. And just go in there, feeling those trees as they go back into here. And giving that real feel of sunlight to the fields. And that same dark is coming across there. In fact, I've got to paint that in a bit more, I think, because that field needs to be some sunlight coming up into there a little bit. It's a bit blue up. Constantly adjusting, being careful about the colours, looking at them, making sure you're not just making assumptions. Do look at the various greens. So I'm going to paint right down, get rid of all those whites. Should have done that before, really. Get rid of all these whites down here. Deep green is even coming into this stone wall here. Let's get rid of all of that. We can start on the highlights. Right, I've nearly lost all of the whites, which is good. So we can concentrate on detail then. Just paint out whites here as well where the buildings are going to go in a minute. Some farm buildings to go there. And just go back to that very deep colour because we've got some quite dark trees in the foreground here. We know that that's dark there behind that house. This tree here. And there's some very, very dark trees in the foreground, or more in the foreground. See just down here, there's one there. Back here. Right down to this corner here where just establishing where things are at the moment. I made that a little bit warmer, that tree there, for a reason, because it's coming closer to us. To use the texture of the canvas a little bit here as I feel for the stonework. A little bit of dry brush over the top of the canvas to make it look a bit more like stone. Come back with some warmer colour in a moment on that, just to tidy it up, but at the moment I just want to establish all of these lights and darks. Right, now back to the greens. Got to lose these little bits of white that are everywhere. There we go, it's better. These buildings, these farm buildings, which are quite light. And it's something like the clouds. They're not so bright that they still look like a sore thumb, but they are lighter than the surrounding area. So we want a very, very light pink to cream again. Let's have a little look-see. Come just over this tree here, a bit of white there, and the end of the building here, little bit there. It's amazing by just a few spots and dashes we can make something look like, or hopefully they do, a couple of buildings. And then we need some rooftop to it. Slightly bluey grey, so I'll take a little bit of the cerulean again, a little bit of that same blue, and we'll just paint in a very grey blue, light blue roofs to them. We've got our farm buildings, as quick and easy as that, look. Just catching the light there. A little bit more. Now back to the trees, and what have we? Some people almost think that penny painting was done, wouldn't they? We're not far off. Go back to our darks again. Very dark I made by using the cobalt and burnt sienna, with then a little touch of yellow just to make it slightly green in tint. And we can just find that hedge that's coming down there. Also find the other hedges and stone walls that are crisscrossing behind. I will do some more green into the top of those trees. Wall here, and perhaps a little bit warmer on the wall as well. A few warms along the wall here, and perhaps a little bit warmer, and the back here as well, just in places, just to give a feeling of the foreground coming out a bit more, and sunlight just catching there. So we'll just add a little bit of that very light sienna and a little bit of white to the wall, just catching the light along here. Not too much, back a bit. It isn't very easy to get this these lighter colours because of the yellows and greens I'm using. Tonally we can just work it, I think. Playing the yellows against the blues. So I think, unless I've missed anything glaring, it's time to go in now with a few sheep and cows. Just finish off these little trees in the background. Come down to a very small brush. And with some of that very light pink, cream come pink, I see about a few sheep here and there. There's a few little white buildings up there as well. Catching the light from something. Now then, sheep. Catching the light here. Right down to here. The sheep and cows know together by the way they look at the dark, which is unusual. There's certainly sheep down here as well. Again, we're just indicating, we're not painting it in detail. It's a bit closer towards us and a bit larger here. Maybe too large. Scrape it back a bit. And amongst them there's some darker tones. Back to my cobalt and parts of yellow, and we'll put in a few dark bits amongst these sheep and cows. Because they're catching the light as well. And again, we probably don't need to do much more to that painting. It'll do, so nice and loose, lively again. Just gives you an idea of how we could work up as photographically as we need to do. I don't need to go much further than that tonight. I just show a little bit more of the sunlight just catching pieces of the wall there, but that's all I need to do.